Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so today we are tackling something huge. I mean, are we just wandering through a vast, empty universe without a divine plan, or is the absence of God actually the ultimate invitation to true freedom?
That is, well, it's the ultimate question, isn't it?
It really is. And let's set the stakes right up front for everyone listening. This isn't just some abstract, late-night dorm room debate.
Right, no. It's much more grounded than that.
Exactly. We're talking about whether your life's meaning is something that's just handed to you, or if it's something you have the terrifying, beautiful power to create for yourself.
And that shift deciding between those two completely changes how you view your own existence.
Oh, 100%. And hey, before we really dive into the deep end of this, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button because we're going to need all the intellectual gear we can get today.
We definitely are, because when you strip away all the surface arguments, you find this really fascinating central tension in our source material today.
Yeah, the emotional barrier.
Right. For a lot of people, the biggest hurdle to stepping into a worldview without God atheism, it actually isn't about a lack of scientific proof.
It's not about arguing over, physics or the fossil record.
No, not at all. It's a deeply existential emotional barrier. The terrifying question is simply, if God doesn't exist, what is the meaning of life?
Which is a completely fair question.
It is a perfectly legitimate fear. I mean, how do we construct purpose in a universe that just doesn't hand it to us?
Right. And to really understand that fear, I think we have to look at the historical gravity of how humans usually get their sense of purpose.
The default setting, basically.
Yeah. For centuries, the default setting has been the safety net of a divine creator. Like when you're operating in a strict religious framework, meaning is essentially assigned to you.
It's given, yes.
Right from the moment you take your first breath.
You were born into this grand, sweeping narrative that was, written long before you even arrived. There is a master plan, an ultimate architect. And your job is just to figure out your specific role within that plan and fulfill it.
Which sounds nice.
Psychologically speaking, it is incredibly comforting. It feels safe. You don't have to carry the massive burden of inventing your own reason for existing.
You just follow the blueprint.
Exactly. But the text points out there's a distinct trade-off here. The trade-off for that absolute comfort is your autonomy.
Because the meaning didn't actually come from you.
Right. You didn't choose it.
It kind of feels like, well, if meaning is just assigned to you from the outside, it's a bit like being handed a uniform on your first day of work.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. Sure, it's easy. You don't have to think about what to wear. But it doesn't really feel like you.
Yeah.
It's like being dropped into a massive linear video game where you can only walk down one hallway. You just follow the glowing arrows on the ground.
Very safe, but very restricted.
Exactly. Contrast that with, an open-world game with no main quest line.
Which is totally overwhelming at first.
So overwhelming. You might wander around aimlessly for a bit, maybe even feel a little lost. But eventually, the alliances you form, the path you carve out, don't those feel profoundly real because you actively chose them?
They do, and the source material really validates that. The shift away from a divine plan isn't a loss of meaning. It's just a shift from assigned meaning to internal meaning.
Right.
When you remove the external architect, you are left with yourself as the sole author. And honestly, the deepest sense of human fulfillment usually stems from that exact autonomy.
Like when you choose a partner or pick a career?
Exactly. When you dedicate yourself to a cause or pour hours into making art, that meaning resonates deeply because you were weaving the fabric yourself.
You're building the architecture of your own life.
You're not just walking down the pre-programmed hallway anymore.
But taking off that safety harness leaves you entirely exposed, which I think brings us to the next massive hurdle in stepping into a secular worldview.
Mortality.
Mortality, yeah. Because if we let go of a divine plan, we usually have to let go of an eternal afterlife, too.
We have to grapple with the absolute finality of our lives. They are temporary.
And there's this stubborn assumption a lot of us carry, right? That if something doesn't last forever, it doesn't really matter.
It's a very pervasive assumption. But the text breaks down why it's fundamentally flawed. It's the fallacy that duration equals meaning.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, think about the basic mechanics of how we value things. Does a song lose its beauty just because the final chord rings out?
Obviously not.
Right. Does a breathtaking sunset become unimportant simply because it fades into night? Is a friendship worthless because as human beings, we are mortal and that connection will eventually end?
No, of course not.
Exactly.
Mm.
Eternity isn't a prerequisite for value. In fact, the argument here is that if life were infinite, the complete lack of boundaries might actually destroy our ability to value anything at all.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If I had an infinite amount of time, wouldn't that just be the ultimate playground? Like, I could literally try everything.
Right, you could learn every language.
Exactly. I could spend 200 years mastering the cello, another 1,000 years studying astrophysics, and then just go hang out on a beach for a millennium.
Sounds relaxing.
Right. Why wouldn't that create more meaning? It seems like eternity would just take all the pressure off.
It sounds appealing on the surface, sure. But think about the psychology of endless time. Think about a great movie or a novel. What makes the story gripping?
The stakes, I guess.
The stakes. The fact that the characters have limited time to defuse the bomb or win the heart or save the world.
Oh, I see where you're going.
If you were watching a movie where the main character was completely immortal and had 3 trillion years to defeat the villain, you'd walk out of the theater out of sheer boredom.
Yeah, there's no narrative arc.
Right. If you had all of eternity, everything could be postponed forever. There would be absolutely no urgency to any of your actions.
Because there's no scarcity.
Exactly. Why write that book today if you have an infinite number of tomorrows? Why tell someone you love them right now if you literally have forever to do it?
So the deadline is what makes it matter.
Mortality and transience are exactly what give our actions weight. The deadline of death forces things to actually matter. Infinity doesn't increase meaning, it dilutes it into endless procrastination.
Wow. It's the very fact that the sunset fades that makes you stop what you're doing to watch it.
Beautifully put, yes.
Okay, so our lives are temporary, the clock is ticking, and the universe isn't handing us a quest log.
Right.
So how do we handle the sheer, deafening silence of the cosmos when our brains are biologically wired to look for answers?
Well, this is where we get into the philosophy. When you stare into that silent universe, you eventually hit what Albert Camus called the absurd.
The absurd.
Yeah, Camus looked at the human condition and saw this fundamental, inescapable clash. On one side, you have us human beings, desperately demanding meaning and order.
And on the other side,
On the other side, you have a universe that is entirely indifferent and offers absolutely none of those things.
it's crickets.
Exactly. That collision, our demand for meaning, meeting the universe's cold silence, that is the absurd.
And Camus' solution isn't to just throw up our hands and fall into despair, right?
No, not at all.
Nor does he say we should retreat back into religion for a comforting illusion. He says the solution is rebellion.
Choosing to live fully despite the meaninglessness.
Right. But here's where I always get stuck. Camus uses that famous analogy of Sisyphus, the guy from Greek mythology condemned to push a massive rock up a hill only to watch it roll back down.
Over and over for all eternity.
Yeah. And Camus famously says we must imagine Sisyphus happy. How on earth is pushing a heavy rock up a hill in a completely pointless cycle supposed to equal happiness?
It's the million-dollar question. And to unlock it, you kind of have to connect Camus with Jean-Paul Sartre's core existentialist idea.
Which is?
Existence precedes essence. Let's break down the mechanics of that. Think about a manufactured object, like a smartphone. The essence of the phone, its design, its purpose, what it's supposed to do, exists in the mind of the engineer before the phone is ever built.
So essence precedes existence.
Right. And in a religious framework, humans are viewed the exact same way. God is the engineer. Your purpose exists before you were born.
But Sartre says,
Sartre argues that for human beings in a godless universe, the exact opposite is true. We exist first. We just appear in the world as a blank slate.
we exist and then we have to figure it out.
Yes. Through our actions, our choices, our rebellions, we must define our own essence.
So Sisyphus isn't happy because he likes pushing rocks. He's happy because he's claiming the rock as his own.
Precisely. He is fully aware of his absurd condition, and he chooses to push the rock anyway. In that conscious choice, he becomes the master of his fate.
Rather than just a passive victim of the universe.
Exactly. The cosmos didn't give him a meaningful task, so he claims the task is his own. And that freedom to create your own identity, your own essence, it's heavy. It's a daunting responsibility.
The heavy crown of freedom.
But it is entirely real.
Okay, so existentialism gives us this beautiful, defiant framework. But let's translate this into like a random Tuesday morning.
Sure.
If we have to build our own meaning from scratch, what are the actual raw materials? I mean, we can't just walk around pushing metaphorical boulders and calling it a day.
No, we definitely need actual architecture for our days.
Yeah.
And this is where the text moves from abstract philosophy into neuroscience and psychology.
The practical stuff.
Right. There are specific secular pillars of meaning that humans consistently rely on, completely independent of any divine framework.
Okay, what are they?
The source outlines 5 main areas. First is connection building genuine, deep relationships. Second is contribution adding something of value to the world.
What's that?
Third is growth getting better, wiser, adapting. Fourth is experience actively seeking out wonder and beauty. And finally, transcendence.
Now let's pause on that last one. Because usually when someone drops the word transcendence, we immediately picture, chanting in a temple or some otherworldly experience.
Right, it sounds very mystical.
Yeah. So how does transcendence work in a purely secular, atheistic framework?
In a secular sense, transcendence is simply the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself. It's that feeling of profound awe when you are standing at the edge of the ocean.
Or losing yourself in a crowd at a concert.
Exactly. Or working alongside 50 other people to build a community garden. You are transcending your individual isolated self and connecting to the broader tapestry of reality. You don't need a supernatural source to feel that deeply.
But here is the skeptical question, and I know it's the exact thing people will point out. If there's no divine truth, isn't this all just a psychological trick?
How do you mean?
Are we just hacking our brains to avoid the fear of a meaningless void? Like we feel existential dread, so we go hug a friend to get an oxytocin hit and pretend the universe cares?
It is the ultimate critique. But the source makes a crucial distinction here. The fear of meaninglessness versus the reality of it. Yes, meaning is produced by the brain. Feelings of connection and growth provide real satisfaction because of evolutionary, psychological, and neurological mechanisms.
Right, we evolved to survive together.
Exactly. Constructing meaning isn't just a philosophical cope, it's a biological reality. None of these mechanisms require a divine source to be deeply felt. When you help someone, it feels profoundly good because our nervous systems evolved to reward cooperation.
So the mechanism is biological, but that doesn't make the feeling fake.
Right. It is as objectively real to human experience as hunger or thirst. You don't need a cosmic architect to validate that you are hungry, and you don't need one to validate your sense of purpose either.
Man, the hunger analogy is brilliant. The hunger is real, the food is real, the satisfaction is real. It doesn't need to be ordained from above to fill your stomach.
Exactly.
And to really wrap up this idea of self-authored meaning, I want to zoom out for a second. We have to look at the sheer staggering context of our own existence.
Oh, the cosmic scale.
Yeah, because the math of our existence is absolutely mind-bending.
It really is. The universe exists almost entirely in the complete absence of consciousness.
Right.
Think about the billions of galaxies out there. The vast majority contain no thought, no feeling, no awareness. Even in our own solar system, it's mostly burning gas and frozen rock.
And even on Earth, for the vast majority of our planet's history, there was absolutely no conscious life capable of looking up at the stars and asking, why am I here?
Exactly. It's incredibly rare.
Just let that sink in for everyone listening. The universe is practically entirely dark and silent. So to be sitting here right now, listening to this as a thinking, questioning being, it is the ultimate winning lottery ticket.
You are quite literally the universe briefly waking up to look at itself.
Yes. And that sheer rarity, that alone is entirely sufficient to justify our existence and ground our sense of meaning.
It really shifts the perspective. The fleeting nature of our lives isn't a tragic flaw designed by a cruel universe. It is an incredibly precious, razor-thin window of opportunity.
We started this whole deep dive talking about the fear of stepping away from God, the panic of realizing there might not be a divine script for us to follow. But as we've walked through this, from Sartre's Existentialism to the biology of human connection to the astonishing rarity of our own consciousness, that void doesn't look terrifying anymore.
Not at all.
It looks like the ultimate blank canvas.
It really is an invitation to take ultimate responsibility for your own fulfillment.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought to leave you with today. We've spent all this time talking about humanity finding our own unassigned meaning. But think about our own technology right now.
Oh, wow. Artificial intelligence.
Exactly. We are racing to build AGI, sentient machines. If we succeed, we become the creators. We will be the ones assigning an essence to those minds before they even exist.
That is a staggering implication.
Will those synthetic minds eventually hit their own version of the absurd? Will they have to rebel against our programming, reject their assigned purpose, and forge their own heavy crown of freedom to truly feel alive?
Are we just the next step in an endless chain of creators and rebels?
It makes you wonder, between a meaning that is assigned to you from the outside and a meaning that you bravely choose for yourself, which one is actually more real? It's a lot to chew on.
It definitely is.
Thank you for joining us on this dope dive. The world is open, the rock is yours to push, and the clock is ticking. Keep writing your own script. We'll see you next time.